All right, guys, I'm so sorry, man. I've just been talking to myself for 20 minutes before I realized I wasn't actually live. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. Man, I'm gonna have to do everything over again. I have to explain a ton of things, and I will have to explain it again. Um, shit. Sorry, guys. What's up, Rafael, Jelena, Gideon, Billy Taylor, and Apricot? I hope you're all doing well. I'm sorry once again for keep you waiting. I was streaming, but for some reason you have to well the thing is you have to press two buttons to go live. You have to start streaming and then press the button to go live, and apparently I didn't hit the go live button well. So I was talking to myself for a while, and I asked at some point if you guys could hear me properly, and that's when I found out since no one was responding that something was fishy, and then I checked YouTube and I wasn't in fact live. Ah, oh man, I'm so sorry, guys. I cannot believe I just talked to myself for 20 minutes. I wait a little bit. Oh man. All right, let's start over. Let's start over. The stream is going so well. I say so. Let me just revise that. All right. Please let me know if you can hear me now in the chat. I will do that. Check that first before I start ranting again. All right. Good. Once again, what's up? It's HFT. What's up, HFT? Cannot hide from us, my friend. All right, guys. Once again, big apology. I did not press the go live button properly. I did a stream, but it's unrecorded and no one heard. So I'm going to start again. Once again, big apology for keeping you guys waiting. But at least I got a rehearsal of what I want to talk about. So let's dive right into it. Let's see what I want to start off with. Yeah, okay. What I want to start off with is what I started off with 20 minutes ago, and let's talk a little bit about the larger time frame. Or actually, no. I wanted to start off with statistics. I did mention the larger time frame when I started off. That obviously, right now we are at this still at this range, in my opinion. But you cannot deny that we've had this massive capitulation event. Whether it's the last capitulation event, I do not dare to say. If anything, this range has proven to us that it can last way longer than we envision, and it's a weird world out there right now. But what we are going to do is look at statistics and take it from the statistics and see what's going to happen based on that. Personally, if I would have to give my 2 cents, I do still think that the highs are targeted, that we do need to go for the highs. But I also believe that that if that were to happen, we have time. Right? It's still more of an educated guess right now than anything else because I think this is unlikely and this is something we're going to talk about. This just happens very, very rarely. And I think something like this is, well, this is very high time frame, obviously, but something like this would be, some maybe more normal. I mean, that would be too long probably, but you get the point. And for that, I want to dive into, and I want to dive into the statistics part of things here. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to review this price action because I do think there's a lot to learn in this price action. Also, in terms of statistics, obviously, we're going to focus on statistics, but I do want to review that. But one of the things I want to show you on why I think a sharp recovery is unlikely, and obviously we have this bounce now, but in my opinion, it would be most likely to go further down and form some sort of range there, and or any form of range locally. And the reason for that is simple. So we had a massive, massive, massive drop here on the Monday, right? This was a 16% drop or something, or maybe it was from here. So we had a 16% drop, yeah, 16% drop there, I think. And what I did was that I went back in the charts and or in the data really, because you can go back in the data. So for example, what you can do, what I did then is, I mean, we can do that by itself. So right now we see this negative 16%. If you, oh wait, actually I have to go through the days. Sorry, I have to do it manually. But so if we look at how many days have such a big displacement, then it's only 3%, and it's now 3% because it was 2.7 on the day itself. But if I look at all these days right here, like I can select them, right? Shift select, and then here I will see. Why am I seeing so little days right now? That's sorry about that. So here then I see all the days that had such a big displacement. So I pretty much went through all those days and I mapped them out on the chart. And I want to make a point of, so these are all the days that have such a massive drop mapped out. What is green is the days that were followed by upside eventually. What is red is what was followed by downside. So in that sense, I don't think there's a clear winner, in my opinion. It really depends on the context as well. But the main thing I want to show you that what we can do take away from it is that after you had such a big drop, here, for example, you see a range. Here we see a range. Here we see some form of range. Like this is pretty much, this was one big ass range actually with this combination. But even here in the short term, we see the range. Here we see the range. Here we don't see a range. But the difference here being is obviously that we came from a massive uptrend, whereas right now we are in this range right here, which is more similar to what happened here and also what happened here. Um, here, here we also see some form of range. Here we also see some form of range. Here we didn't really see a range, but it's the same thing. This massive, massive impulsive move where we came from. Here we saw a very sharp recovery, but this was the COVID crash. So this was an economic meltdown, which obviously you cannot compare it to our current price action. Here we saw a range form. Here we saw some range form. Here we saw very little one. I'm going to discard it. And here we saw some range form. The essence of it is this: we can just see if you go back on all these days where you had such a big negative displacement that it usually takes a while for price to really consolidate and recover from that, probably because it's a lot of fear in the market. People get shaken out, and then prices need a while, and the market participants need a while to figure out, what am I going to do and what we're going to do from here. But it's safe to say that this was a massive, massive, massive day. I mean, just look at the volume. Absolutely ginormous, that volume. Crazy. So a lot of people got shaken out here. It's especially remarkable to see how well Bitcoin held compared to the rest. That seems to be the common denominator this cycle. I do have a thing or two to say about that as well. But it is really cool to see. But the thing is that I wouldn't expect for these reasons, I wouldn't expect this. I would expect something like this to be, I don't know, if it goes up, something like that. But regardless, what that means is that we have some time here, most likely, and that we don't have to rush into anything, at least on the high time frames. And we can let the market show its hand. And right now, it has not yet. So for me, it's the same thing as what I said. After this dump, patience and then kind of see what the market's going to do. And maybe the market will tell us. I'm still allocated to spot, by the way. But for now, what I'm going to do is just play the lower time frame statistics and take it from there. So the lower time frame statistics, what I want to talk about. And the thing is that I really want to talk about the weekly P1 and the weekly P2, and also on the daily P1 and P2. Basically, it is what I said at the start. Yeah, it's weird to go through this again because I already went through it. But what I wanted to say is that I came out at the start of the week when this happened, and I said, okay, I would throw the weekly statistics overboard now, and I would still do that. So right now, the weekly statistics are all indicating exhausted bear, and they did so since Monday 6 a.m. already. And so I came out and said, okay, throw the weekly statistics overboard. Do not look at the weekly statistics. For me personally, that's what I would do. The reason for this being is that we already know this is an improbable event, right? A 16% drop, it is very improbable on the daily. We've seen that it's like a 3% occurrence in the last 4.5 years. But Also on the weekly, this drop is improbable. We can see if we go on the weekly distance page that only, and I already know it because I went through it, only 25% of weeks, let me just automate that, only 25% of weeks went lower than this. You have to realize that this happened, this 25% happened within 6 hours on Monday, right? So at Monday, 6 a.m. UTC, we already reached this 25%. On the daily, we know it was only 3% occasion. So what you know is that we are already in the realm of the improbable. We're already in the realm of the improbable. This is an improbable move. So looking for probable statistics does not make sense. It does not make sense because we're already in the realm of the improbable. We already know that only 25% of weeks come this low. And that's most likely, I mean, you can see that if you select all these weeks. Oh, if you select all these weeks that went that low, you can see that, P2 Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Wednesday. Just look at when the P2s are on such aggressive weeks. They're all on later days than Monday, at least. And meaning that most of them had a lot of time to move. So this only needed 6 hours to get here. So we already know we're in the realm of the improbable. Like this doesn't happen a lot. This doesn't happen a lot. So it doesn't make sense to start looking for moves that uh, are in the realm of the probable. So what I mean with that, for example, is that I've seen this and I've warned against it already, and I'm going to warn against it again. Is that people look, for example, now at the time statistics, and they say, well, P1 is on Monday, P2 is on Monday, and we have this obviously a very low historical probability to take out P1, 1.9% to be exact. I mean, and that is with all days included. If I look at only Mondays, which is what I do, then it's probably going to be 2.9. Actually, that's crazy. But still, it's very low probability. So then people say, okay, well, P1 is likely to hold because it never happens. Then they look at time statistics and they see, right, Monday, never happens, rarely happens at P2, 2.4%. So I'm going to target the low. I personally wouldn't do this. I personally wouldn't do this because of what I said. So we're already in the realm of the improbable. Like this, you can throw like high probable views on the weekly out of the window because we already know we're in improbable territory. So it doesn't make sense to look for that probable play anymore because we know we are behaving in a very improbable manner. So I wouldn't look at that. Besides, if you go on the P2 on the Monday, we already know that only 25% of weeks go down that far. So for me, I personally wouldn't want to see that. Uh, and there's an even more extreme example that we're going to look at on the daily. But the main takeaway is this. We had an improbable event. So, we know we are in the realm of the improbable, right? This is like an improbable event, which means that it doesn't make a lot of sense to start looking at probable events because we've passed that, right? We've passed that station. No probable events in this week. So I would say discard all of them or discard the weekly statistics, at least for this week, right? Sometimes that's just it's the same as like taking a trade versus not taking a trade. Sometimes it's good to take a trade, sometimes it's good to not take a trade. Sometimes it's good to follow the statistics, sometimes it's good to say, okay, the statistics are improbable right now. We had an improbable event, so for this week, I will discard it. It's also why I said, okay, don't look at daily statistics on Monday. We're going to get into that. And by the way, I know I'm just recapping current price action. We're going to look at current statistics later on, but I think it's important to go through this. So what I said was, okay, look at daily six again Tuesday or Wednesday, but let this just play out for a bit. Well, that's on the daily time frame. Right now, we have it on the weekly, and that means just let this week play out for a bit, and then look at the weekly statistics again. So right now, we're almost going to take out P1. I don't know if it will happen, and frankly, even if we do, I wouldn't be surprised to go down a little bit again in range. And that's the next thing I want to show you is that, the last two times we had a P1 and a P2 or such an aggressive day, or let me put it like this, we can look at the last two times we had a P1 and P2 on the same day. Because if you remember, I came out on Discord yesterday and I said often after a move like this, something like this happens when you reach a range in between P1 and P2. I mean, right now we're almost taking out P1. I realize this, but the idea still remains the same. Is that this very often happens after such an aggressive move. So one, we know we're in the Why not listen to the weekly statistics? Well, one, we know we're in the realm of the improbable. Two, oftentimes we start ranging in between the weekly high and the weekly low. So let's look at the last time we had Monday SP1 and Monday SP2. So both Monday, the weekly high and the weekly low were P1 and P2. And I know exactly where this is because I've already talked about this to myself. So we hear, it's a similar thing. We had this aggressive move, and not nearly as aggressive as we had now. This is 8%, but it's still a very that's still a very rare move, and we can see that in the statistics. But what happened after that is, well, you can see it. The price just kind of ranged in between this Monday high and this Monday low, and why that is something we can only form an educated guess. It's what I said. I do think after an aggressive move, people are fearful. People need to kind of like wait and see a little bit. People just exited, and the market just needs some time to recover. So you can see, this is kind of what I'm referring to when I'm saying that, big move, and then price usually, I've seen this quite a bit, ranges in between. And I think the time before that, when it happened, was here. And I know this because, again, I've already talked about this to myself. So here was the same thing, weekly open, weekly close, or weekly close here. And you can see the weekly low was put in here on Monday and the weekly high was put in here on Monday. It was equally a very wild move. This actually looks quite a bit on what we're seeing right now. Yeah, this even took a little bit longer than what we saw. This actually took quite a bit. And we can see that we just range in between the weekly high and the weekly low. So therefore is what I'm saying, it's a very long story of saying, ignore the weekly statistics for this week. And I would expect something like this to play out. This actually looks very, 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 not very similar, but it looks somewhat similar. So regardless, and that's a more important thing to understand, regardless of what's going to happen, like regardless of what's going to happen, it would be an improbable event. This already is an improbable event. This would be an improbable event. This would be an improbable event. Like literally everything is an improbable event at this point on the week. So discard the weekly for this week at least, right? Next week we can look at it again. But for now, I would discard this. All right, let me quickly check the questions. What's up, Auka? Good to see you, man. All right, no questions yet. Everyone can hear me. Then the next thing I want to look at, and again, this is a word of caution. What I saw a lot of people do, or well, not a lot of people, but I've seen this setup shared. And would it be interesting, by the way, to reject here and then go there again? This range in between this weekly high and weekly low is, yeah, what I think is not an unlikely event. But I want to go on Monday because on Monday I came out and I said a similar thing. I said, I would not do anything here. Let's go here on Monday. There we go. So this was us on Monday, and then this is another good thing to note. It's like kind of on the same page as what we were just discussing. So we had this massive event, this massive drop on the daily, which was negative 16% in 6 hours, mind you. 6 hours. I cannot even go this low. No, that's why. This doesn't even allow for greater input. I need to change that. Actually, more difficult than you think. So this is actually less than negative 16%, negative 60 or 3.1%. Where is it? It's here. So yeah, it's even less. It's like 2.7% of days have that much of a displacement. What then people tend to do is they go to the time-based statistic. They see, okay, daily P1 hour 0, daily P2 hour 6. P1 hour 0, we know, well, at this point, obviously, this is going to hold, right? It would be very improbable to take that out. But then you see this hour 6, and we see, 0.4% never happens, right? Almost never happens. And I remember this last P2 at Monday was 700 days or something, which means that it had been almost 2 years since, yeah, really almost 2 years since we took put in a P2 at hour 6. So then what people do is, well, that's improbable. So and then people think, okay, I'm going to target it because it's a low probability P2, and I mean whatever the stop loss is, and they go for lower. And I already said back then I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't expect it to take out the low. The reason for that is, once again, we're already at very low probability events. The main reason I can give I wouldn't do this is this statistic right here. You are betting on a less than 3% occurrence, right? Less than 3% of days go below this. Less than 3% of days. So what you are doing is saying, well, yes, our 6 almost never puts in a P2, but if it were ever going to happen, this would be a very, very, very good setup to do it. And I personally expect that P2 to stay because this is very improbable, right? Very, very, very improbable. Only 2.6% of days have, or 2.7% of days have a less displacement. Then again, this is 3.1 because I cannot go below 15, but less displacement than what we see here. So you're banking on a very low probability event happening. Once again, it's the same thing here. We are already in the realm of the improbable, right? What you are doing by looking at hour 6 and saying, well, that's an improbable event, you're looking for the probable play within an improbable environment. We already know it's improbable. So, that's why on days like this, I say, okay, throw statistics out of the window. I wouldn't look at this anymore. Wait for the next day. Wait for the next day. So I hope that part makes sense. I just want to clarify that because personally, I would not ever take this short. I've seen this more. I've also written it in the distance statistic tutorials right now, that this is a way I use this, that if there's just, if all the probabilities are good, like this probability is low, the P2 is low probability in terms of time, but this is very low like this, then I personally just wouldn't trade into it because you just know you already have so much displacement. It's very improbable to get even more displacement. So, not something I personally would throw myself in the way of. And, well, no, the rest is history. We can indeed see that price moved on. It didn't take out that P2, so we did have that improbable P2. Once again, it is because we are already in the realm of the improbable. So if that improbable event's ever going to happen, well, we know we're already in the improbable, so might as well happen. And I've written more stories about this. It would also be funny to reject right now and leave that Monday high intact. But regardless, maybe we do take that Monday high. I'm not saying we cannot, but if we do, then I also wouldn't expect it to. I just think that the recovery like this, as much as I would want to see it, is unlikely. Right. Again, I think something like this, and maybe something like this, if there is going to be a recovery, would be more logical. But again, I do think we have time. History tells us we have time. We have just looked at all the events since 2018 that are more or less similar in terms of distance, and you can see that most often you do have time. So from the times you do not have time, it's actually more bearish from what I've seen. So we can just be patient here and start playing the daily statistics again, which is a nice bridge to the current daily statistics. All right. All right. This was just Black Swan on all markets, not just on crypto. Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I do think there were some signs, but yeah, I also definitely think that surprise interest rate hike by the Japanese bank, the Bank of Japan, and the carry trade that imploded because of that really took a lot of people by surprise, including me. So that was definitely something that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, that they were raising interest rates. And I saw today that they were actually might be reverting on that because apparently they were pretty shook about what happened. So let's see. There might have been a policy error. We are seeing quite a bit of those. But yeah, it was definitely a big swan event, but black swan event, but we're gonna have to see how we're gonna recover from this. Again, I still think we're still more or less in that range. For well, Nah, we're not in the value range. We did lose it. So what's going to happen next is important. But again, let's trade the lower time frames. Let's take it here because probably something like that will happen. All right, on to the current statistics. Let's see if there's anything. So for me, if I see this, I'm really going to be cautious because I just made my case, right? I just made my case. If I see this, I can already guess that if there's going to be statistics in favor of something, it's probably going to be bullish because of what Bitcoin is doing, and Bitcoin is definitely the leader. We can see that Bitcoin dominance is still, very much going up, right? It's just been going up a lot. So Bitcoin is definitely the thing to take into account. You can see that everything has been following Bitcoin for the most part. Some rare exceptions there. Come on, load. But so, I've just made my case that I do think that a lot further upside is limited. Uh, that would, in my opinion, be the most probable scenario to have some form of retracement here. I do think this would be more of a place to take a short than take a long. At this point, is what I'm saying. After that complacency bounce, we obviously had this massive wick to the downside. Oftentimes, these get filled. But, but. So, oh yeah, what I want to say is that so if this goes down, and again, I do not think that's a very improbable or unrealistic scenario, as much as I would want this to continue turning up. But I don't think it would be an unrealistic scenario. And if this goes down, then probably the rest of the altcoin markets are going to go with it. So this is something I'm keeping in mind. At this point, like I've said since the start, I do think we need to start forming a range here. And the question is, are you trading, if you're taking a long here, are you trading into the range high? Right? Sometimes it's just best to give price some time to figure it or show a little bit of what it's doing. So if we think of value, yeah. So if there were a range to follow the form here, I would expect this kind of to become the POC. It's still too early to say, really, but then this would kind of become like this. So we would spend some time here, like right here. We would spend some time here, and you kind of fill up these gaps here, and then you kind of start growing this into a range as such. Could definitely be happening. It's too early to say, but this is something I'm taking into account, right? This is what I think is the most probable scenario. And if we do V-shaped recovery from here, then that would be an improbable scenario. It's simply a fact. I mean, we looked at the history. We know it doesn't happen that much. We saw that at the COVID dump, and that's about it. Uh, so that's something I want to keep in mind before going into the statistics. Let's go into statistics right now. Basically, I'm just a lot more careful with statistics if it's such an improbable week. Like right now, I would be if I would be trading the 4 hour or the 8 hour, I would definitely want to look at that. That's fine. But the weekly, no. The daily, cautious. But let's see here. So this also for me, it's just it's not really screaming anything. I personally don't like to take chances on the bull signals, which is these are my thresholds for it. But not the biggest fan of them. I prefer to see all the strong bulls. Although, you could probably lower this. To be honest, you could probably consider this strong bull as well, depending on your appetite. Like this is 70 years is really conservative. But we have a tool where we can be conservative, so why not? But just going to the daily and see which ones stand out. Then I'm just gonna filter it on high probability plays. So I don't want to see days with less than 50% chance of more distance. This is what I want to look at. Right, so this is what I mean. So right now, Bitcoin is actually showing a bullish signal, right? We only have 7.1% of days where P1 has a bigger distance. In other words, the current P1 seems relatively safe because it doesn't happen often that hour 10 or later puts in that P1 here, and then does this. But, but, this is exactly what I mean. We are here. We are here, right? So if, well, let's state the fact first. If this were to happen, it would be a low probability event. It would be a low probability event. Let's get out of the way. So purely in probabilistic terms, it would actually be fine to say, well, it does seem way more likely that this is not going to hold. So I'm just going to take that. But for me personally, because of the whole situation I just sketched, that it makes a lot of sense to start retracing here. For me personally, I would say, okay, I'm gonna refrain from taking any action there. But it really depends on your system. I would understand if you say, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna go for that, because you do have, you have these low highs. I don't think it looks very strong, and I don't think it's gonna lead to immediate recovery. But I'm happy to be wrong. But you could say, okay, I'm just gonna take that and go for the highs, because the statistics are definitely indicating that on the grand scheme of things, higher is likely. So probabilistically speaking, it would be good practice to say, okay, well, I'm just going to take that and aim for higher, because I know if you take this kind of setup, if you do this long enough, that you're going to be on the right side of the probabilities, and even if you're wrong now. So what I'm saying now is like, well, if that improbable event is going to happen, this would be a good time and place to do it. But you could also just say for yourself, well, I don't care about that, because I know that if I follow these probabilities over the long run, then I'm going to be right more often than I'm wrong, which is in the end the end goal. So I'm just being cautious here because of the environment that I sketched, like the context. But purely looking at daily statistics, this would actually not be a weird play at all to take for further upside. It's just that I don't like where we are in the charts. I don't like where we are in the charts. And let me see. See. Eh, yeah. So personally, for me, I don't like that much in the chart, which I'm more hesitant. One that really sparked my attention though is Rune. So we have Rune with 7.6% here and 79% here. So this 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 is this is the statistic you want to see. Like, it doesn't get much better than this. 7.6% against 79%. So we have a very, very low probability that P1 will get taken. And we have a very high historical probability that there will be more displacement. And we've had a big retracement as well, 0.6. So let's take a look at Rune. But again, I say the same thing here, right? It doesn't happen a lot, but if Bitcoin were to do this, then it's definitely going to happen on Rune. I mean, definitely very likely to happen on Rune. Yeah, I wouldn't take it personally. So we have a very good RR right now, but I mean, this for me is just I just see weakness here. You barely were able to break this. So this is what you see. You see this. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here, here, here. You kind of see the highs getting the difference getting lower, right? It's flattening out like this, which is usually a sign of exhaustion. It's one of the things I use to time the top in back in March. So you can see this just kind of flattening out, which is not a good sign. And then we have all the under context factors indicating that this is quite a risky place to go down, or at least a more probable place to go down on Bitcoin, and therefore other probably other assets as well. So personally, if I see this, um, uh, yeah, I mean, it's the same argument. You could choose to just say, I'm just going to enter this. I mean, right now, it really depends on your system. You would have a really tight invalidation, because your invalidation is right here at P1. So this is a really good RR too. You can just choose to say, okay, I'm just going to enter that, and I realize we're in a more low probability environment. So the context is saying that we are at areas where we could reverse. But purely statistically speaking, we know it's unlikely, 7.6%. So even if it happens now, we just know it's one of those 7.6%. So one of those very unlikely events that happens. And as a trader, you're not trying to be perfect. You're just trying to be right more often than you're wrong. So it's perfectly fine to say, well, I don't care. I'm just going to take it. And if I'm wrong, I'll let the market prove me to me I'm wrong. But I know that next time probably I will be right if I take this kind of setup. So, obviously it also depends on your TA, whatever you want to apply. But it would be perfectly viable to actually take this and go for the highs because it is only a 7.6% chance. And that's when looking at this is a conservative estimate right now. I explained that in a video because if I would go here, no, never mind. It's the same. 7.6%. Yeah. So not a big probability. So you could choose to take that and just say, well, I know I'm going to be wrong at some point, and it's fine. Personally, for me, I just really don't like the area where we're at. We do have a Monday P1 in that. This is already a very improbable event on Rune. I don't imagine this P1 P2 flip would have happened a lot. Goes to show. But I do not like the area where we're at. So this is just, I cannot make this decision for you. This is a decision you must make for yourself. Really depends on your strategy. I know people who say, well, I'm going to take that regardless because I know if I take it often enough, I'm going to be profitable. And that's a very, very valid way of looking at things. A very, very good way of looking at things because it's probabilistic thinking. So in that sense, as well, you can just say, well, right now, just low, higher highs, higher lows. Yes, they are diminishing, but so far it's higher highs and higher lows. And I'm just going to play that and go for the highs. And if it reverses, it reverses. But right now, I will just break the probabilities. Perfectly fine to do that. Let's look at some other statistics. Yeah, I would say near also looks really nice. But yeah, it's kind of all the same round. Yeah. Personally, if I can really say what I would do, I would personally not act on this. I would personally not be longing any of it. It's the same thing here. We had this massive bounce. We are see diminishing highs. We know that after such an enormous drop that usually we need to range a bit. So far, all we've done is gone up after that drop. So we know that historically speaking, it's more likely to have a little retracement again and start looking for that range. And a V-shaped recovery would just be the most improbable event. So yeah, I wouldn't take any longs here. That would be my conclusion. But again, that's just applying context, and it would be perfectly fine to look for longs if you're taking a systemic approach. Some alts already started losing P1, so maybe we won't see the most probable event today, Kuba. Yeah, I agree. I do think, like I said, if it were to happen, I think this would be a good time and place for it to happen. And if some alts already started losing P1, then let's see, Compound, I guess, is one of them. Yeah. Eat BTC just hitting the floor. Engine going close. LDO broke it. So it's actually interesting. I haven't taken enough note of this, but I have seen that if you see other alts start. So right now we have this situation where we're saying, or at least I'm saying, that I do think a chance of the P1 P2 flip is more likely than usual. because of the context I laid out. And I have noticed that if you start seeing other assets perform that P1, P2 flip, that oftentimes it is a leading indicator, and that Bitcoin will follow or other coins will follow. So for me, this is also a sign of weakness that these are just some of the weaker coins, and I do think I do think that lower is likely or more probable than normal. And this is kind of how you apply a subjective weight to the probability. Because basically, what I'm doing now is that yes, I know this is a low probability play to take out the low, but given the context, I would say that in reality the probabilities are probably a little bit higher. Again, you don't have to do this. You can long this, and it would be perfectly fine in probabilistic terms if you say, well, I'm fine with taking a loss. I'll take the win the next time. But for me, this is what I call anticipating improbable events. There's just sometimes that based on experience, that improbable events are more likely to happen. I personally just choose not to act on those, and I think this is one of those contexts. All right, so I did want to go over the statistics just to explain how I would interpret them, because in terms of pure statistics, they do look good for further upside on the day. I just think the context is not that nice, and therefore I choose not to act on them. I do think we need some more time here for price to show its hand, to show its range, most likely. And I think it's good to be patient in situations like this. Apricot. I tend to look at ETH if and when it flips. More often than not, Bitcoin does the same. Yeah, that's actually a good one. What is ETH doing? All right, so ETH is already almost flipping the P1. So you can see the market is starting to turn. I think the longer we sit here on this page, we will see. Yeah, but we will probably see less and less of these as the P1 flips. Sorry. Yeah, also weakness there. Rune, almost. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I think ETH could definitely be, especially in times of weakness, because ETH has proven to be very, very weak lately. And for ETH, it's the same thing, right? ETH is even crazier than Bitcoin, by the way. I shared his chart on Twitter. But ETH obviously had this massive drop, and this took the negative. In terms of negative days, it was in the top 0.8%. Only 0.8% of days had such a negative drop, and I shared a chart on Twitter of the last time that happened, and it was a long time ago. Let's see. Here, this was the last time we had such a negative drop, and then here, and then these were all the times in the last since 21 where we had such a negative drop. We can see that one time it led to further downside. This one had yellow because where it first went down and then went up. This time here it bottomed, here it bottomed, here it bottomed, and here it bottomed. But regardless, we see kind of the same thing. You see this range here, a range here, not here. And this was actually mass fuckery. And here we also saw some form of range. But I would expect the same. But so this ETH is even more improbable on that day. But yeah, you just ETH looks a lot worse than Bitcoin, by the way. Right? Like Bitcoin, you can just see Bitcoin didn't really lose anything very convincingly yet, but ETH obviously has here. You can see we're still at these lows, and this is also why ETH Bitcoin is nuking so much at the moment, because ETH just performing a lot worse. And yeah, it may be good a couple of words because I do think that's it for the statistics part of things. So, for example, I was looking here at this for this to be the low of EBTC. That idea got invalidated. For this to be the low, then obviously you needed this to be the range. And I do think we're seeing that breakdown of the range now, or at least for that range to be more valid, you wanted to have seen some highs taken, and all that we did was simply go up here, make a lower high, and then go lower again. And considering the current circumstance, I just don't see how price is going to do this right now. So lower, I think is likely. I'm personally an ETH holder. I have Bitcoin and ETH mostly. I rotated some of my Bitcoin into ETH here, and my invalidation was here. So I still hold a lot of ETH. Don't get me wrong, but I've de-risked a little bit, and now it's more balanced again towards Bitcoin and Ethereum together. Because I wanted to have this range here, and if I just see this, I mean, now it's just, I mean, evidently it cannot break out of this downtrend. So that also didn't happen here. I do think it will still have its run. Will probably be a little longer. So for me, it made sense to take a little bit, not much because I DCA'd here. Take a little bit of loss here on one of these DCA'd here. Go back into Bitcoin. Idea was wrong. That happens. I do think it's gonna take a little bit longer than we used to, and that's actually a good note because I've seen the same goes for Bitcoin dominance. Like man, I've seen people call for an altcoin season for months now, like for months, literally for months. There's accounts on crypto Twitter saying, "Oh, the altcoin bottom is closed. The altcoin bottom is closed. Alt season about to start. Alt season about to start." I mean, have you seen the altcoin? More. This is not. I want total two. You know, people have been saying since here that the altcoin bottom is closed, or that the rotation to Bitcoin is going to happen. And I think that the truth is simply that it's not happening, and it's very unprecedented for what we have seen before. I think if by now you have not caught up with the fact that this cycle is just completely uncomparable to any previous cycle, then you're just diluting or not looking at what's happening. So, you know, who knows when this thing is going to top? I'm definitely no expert in Bitcoin dominance, and you would still expect some form of alt season at some point, but we have to be realistic and say, man, it's very unprecedented that it's not happened yet. And I think people kept saying like, oh, they said, well, this is top. Well, this is top. This is the top. Here's the top. Yeah, now we get the top. Now we get the top. Yeah, top. Final rejection. I mean, look at it. It's still it's going up. It's going up. So for me, I'm just going to assume that Bitcoin dominance is going to keep rising until I see some clear signs that it's not going to keep rising. And the same is for BTC. I will assume it's going to keep dropping until I see some clear signs it's not. And I don't think there's much here, so it could actually go quite a bit lower because the cycle just doesn't seem to play out as normal. And then I think so many people also got absolutely wrecked on altcoins. For me, luckily, I'm only in Bitcoin and Ethereum, so I didn't get wrecked that hard, and a little bit of Doge. I didn't get wrecked that hard. Obviously, my Ethereum holdings are taking a beating in terms of Bitcoin, but that's what it is. Name of the game, diversification. But yeah, at this point, I'm not making any illusion that this has to reverse in a very fast manner or anything. Right? It can be quite a while, and Solana is not a good indicator because Solana is obviously one of those coins that have been doing very very well. I mean, wow, look at this! It's breaking out on the ETH pair right now, so it just shows the damage on Sol ETH. But Solana is one of the exceptions, right? This is not doesn't mean that there is an altcoin season going on at the moment because quite simply there is not. But Solana has been doing absolutely epic. I mean, look how well it held as well. Solana actually looking best out of all the coins, even better than Bitcoin. We just SFP'd this low right here. But the one thing I would say on Solana, if I'm doing some TA on it anyway, is that this doesn't look too good. Or wait, what am I doing? More often than not, you see equal lows taken. So this might not be the end of it. But I mean, there was an enormous amount of volume here, so there's definitely plenty of capitulation. So maybe this time is different because usually you don't see this much volume on equal lows. And this is pretty much equal, but it might change. But anyway, the main point I want to make, like this, don't get fooled by influencer accounts who've been saying like, "Oh, the altcoin bottom is closed, alt season is closed, alt season is closed." Man, if anything, it might last months more. So far it's not giving us any signs there's an altcoin season around the corner. None. So I wouldn't bang my bets on it. What I'm saying. All right, let's check one more time, see what's going on, and then I'm gonna wrap up unless there's any questions. So far, Bitcoin is still showing a bit of weakness. Moving further down. Yeah, I would look some of the other coins. So, for example, Rune, we knew had a high probability setup. So, I would personally be paying attention to Rune as well, see what's that doing. Looks like it's going for the P1, which is what we're saying, that it does seem more likely for it to happen now. So, yeah, I do think these P1, P2 flips are going to happen. And ETH is about to happen as well. So, that kind of, I guess that's a nice way to wrap it up. That indeed, let's just wait for it because it seems inevitable at this point. That indeed, that P1, P2 flip is happening. And again, that's because of the context I painted. So yes, this is a more improbable event, but you could have also foreseen it coming because of the context. We foresaw it coming in this stream where we said, well, it does look like, if you look at the context, there's the P1, P2 flip. If you look at the context at lower, it seems more likely. You can see the slowly start seeing everything turn red, except for Solana, which is an absolute monster. It's crazy. But you can slowly start seeing everything turn red. And so ETH now flip, Rune now flip, and the logical conclusion would be that Bitcoin is next. Right? So in this case, it would have been a good decision. Bitcoin is actually holding quite strong. So who knows? But it seems evident that it's going to follow. And if that happens, that idea of this range in between the weekly high and the weekly low becomes more likely as well. But regardless, again, I do not think this kind of move would be likely at all. It would be very unlikely. I mean, I don't just think that it would be unlikely. Can't happen, but unlikely in something like this would make more sense. And then we can take it from there. And given this, it also gives us time. It gives us breathing room, and it we know that we don't have to rush anything. So I think that's it for today. I think we will see that P1, P2 flip on Bitcoin happening as well, which will further confirm our ideas of length range in between a weekly high and a weekly low. I hope this was informative to you. I know I went through a lot. Again, I went through some things I would pay attention to, dealing with improbable events. I do think it's very important as it can greatly increase your win rate. For example, if you can read the context here and say, well, I know the statistics are indicating long, then yes, if you would have taken a long and you take this long, like if you take hundreds of those, then you're most likely going to be profitable by the end of it. But personally, if you can recognize the context where these unlikely events are more likely to happen, then obviously that's going to increase your win rate. So why not do it? So I hope you learned a thing or two and what I'm looking for based on that. Also, how I look for them. Again, these moves here, I literally just look them up, and I'm gonna make a tutorial about this table because I think it's underutilized. I personally use this a lot, as you've seen, like this table. For example, I was using it at the start of the stream on the weekly to see, okay, when did we have similar negative days or weeks, and when did we have a P1 and P2 on the same day, and then just check what happened on those days. So, it's a very good way of using it, in my opinion. It can definitely clarify things. But yeah, looks like we're going lower, and then I would expect to go somewhere to these lows, and then to start forming our range somewhere unless we just nuke straight down, which would be the most bearish scenario. But as I mentioned, I do think that if we get a range, then we will fill this here, we'll fill this here, and then we're going to get something. Oh, we're going to get something like this. So that's what I'm looking at now. But the main takeaway is this: patience, 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 patience. We have some time, and look at her go down. Beautiful. Let her go. All right, all right, guys. Thank you for joining once again. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Next week I'll be back. Next week there's also a stream with Tim again, back from holidays. So be on the lookout for that. For now, I want to wish you a great day, good week, and I'll catch you in the next stream and in the Discord. All right, guys, have a good one.